Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. How have you been lately? Got your cup of tea or coffee ready? Because today I have a story that'll melt your heart and maybe even make you believe in love all over again. Imagine being left at the altar and somehow finding real love not in luxury but in a quiet cafe with a man who makes warm bread and even warmer memories. Let's dive into Sophie and Ethan's story, where heartbreak leads to something far more beautiful than any fairy tale ever told. Sophie Evans had planned over 100 lavish weddings in her career, but today, it was finally her turn to walk down the aisle, a spring ceremony at a lakeside estate in Portland, Oregon. The air was cool, the light drizzle romantic. Her white gown shimmered under the soft gray sky. Everything was perfect. Except the groom. She stood still, heels pinching, smile trembling as the minutes passed. Guests murmured behind polite faces, camera phones clicked. Maybe he's just stuck in traffic, she told herself, but deep down, she knew. Then her phone buzzed. Sophie, I'm sorry. I can't do this. 10 words, no reason, no goodbye, just enough to shatter a dream. Sophie didn't speak. She didn't scream. She just turned and ran. Out of the decorated tent, past the shocked stares, into the rain. Her wedding gown soaking through, train catching on the pavement, hair sticking to her face. The cold cut through her like glass. She kept walking, aimless and lost, the pain too loud to process. Rain mixed with tears. Her bare feet burned against the concrete. Then, without even knowing where she was, Sophie collapsed in front of a tiny cafe tucked between two brick buildings. A faded wooden sign read, Heart and Hearth Cafe. And there, in the pouring rain, the wedding planner who once crafted fairy tales passed out like a forgotten chapter. Ethan Hart was wiping down the coffee bar when he heard a strange thud just outside. Rain still poured steadily, but that sound didn't belong. He frowned, set the rag aside, and stepped out into the drizzle. There, lying motionless on the soaked sidewalk, was a woman in a wedding dress, rain clinging to her like sorrow, her bare feet blue from the cold. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Well, that's new, he whispered, but his feet were already moving. Without thinking twice, he crouched down and gently lifted her. Her skin was ice cold, dress clinging like wet paper. He carried her inside, placed her on the old bench near the fireplace, and grabbed the frayed blanket he kept for chilly mornings. After tucking it around her, he moved to the counter to make hot cocoa. A few minutes later, Sophie stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and glassy. Where am I? Ethan turned around, voice steady but not unkind. My cafe. You passed out on the sidewalk. She looked around. Small wooden tables, golden lighting, the faint scent of cinnamon. Then her gaze dropped to her mud-streaked wedding dress. Everything came crashing back, the text, the silence, the stares. She swallowed hard. Please, can I stay here tonight? Just one night. I don't have anywhere else. I can't face the world like this. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't the type to invite chaos. His world was quiet, simple, just him and his coffee beans. But looking at her, shivering and broken, something softened. One night, he said, don't break anything. She nodded, curling tighter under the blanket. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan Hart, barista, loner, creature of habit, let someone into his space. The next morning, Ethan found Sophie still there, no longer curled on the bench, but sprawled on the floor beside the fireplace, wrapped awkwardly in the blanket. Her wedding dress, once pristine, was now a crumpled mess. Didn't you say it was just for one night? He asked, frowning. Sophie yawned and sat up, hair tangled like a bird's nest. I changed my mind. The press is probably out there like a pack of vultures. Please, just let me stay a few more days. Ethan crossed his arms, clearly annoyed. This is a coffee shop, not a motel. Just a few days, she repeated, clutching the blanket tighter, eyes pleading. He sighed, long and loud. Fine, but take care of your own meals. And don't touch my stuff. On her very first day, Sophie turned the place upside down. She raided his fridge like a tornado, knocked over a full bottle of soy sauce, and groaned, I'm starving. Isn't there anything here besides bread? Ethan rushed in, yelling, "What are you doing?" She gave him a sheepish smile. "Just looking for food. You can't seriously eat only carbs." "You think I'm your private chef or something," he snapped, but then cooked her a simple plate of spaghetti anyway. When he set it in front of her, he muttered, "Eat it. Don't waste my effort." She took a bite and blinked in surprise. "This is really good. You're actually a great cook." He smirked. "You haven't seen anything yet." Day 2, she refused to shower and stayed wrapped in his old hoodie, scrolling through her phone on the sofa all day. "They're calling me the disaster bride," she groaned. Ethan glanced at her. "Well, they're not entirely wrong. Look at yourself." She glared at him and then laughed. And for the first time since that awful wedding day, Sophie felt a little lighter. On the 3rd day, Sophie decided to give back by helping Ethan in the cafe. She offered to carry a tray of flour and promptly dropped the whole thing, turning them both into powdered ghosts. "You're a walking disaster," Ethan shouted, but then burst into laughter at the sight of her fumbling apology. "I was just trying to help," she muttered, cheeks flushing red. And so it went, day after day. Despite all his grumbling, Ethan let her stay. She devoured nearly all the bread he baked, lounged on his sofa like a cat, watched old TV shows, and occasionally teased him for being a cranky old man. Ethan complained, but quietly bought her an extra pillow. Though he didn't admit it, her presence made the place feel a little less lonely. One evening, when Sophie spilled her coffee for the 3rd time that week, Ethan didn't scold her like usual. He quietly wiped it up, poured her a fresh cup, and said in a softer tone, "Watch it, it's hot." Sophie blinked at him. "Why are you being nice all of a sudden?" Ethan turned away. "I'm tired of yelling." Another night, Sophie couldn't sleep, haunted again by nightmares of the wedding, the stairs, the shame. She wandered out to the living room and curled up on the sofa. Ethan, baking late at night as usual, noticed her. He didn't ask questions. He simply placed a warm piece of bread in front of her and said, "Eat. You won't sleep if you're hungry." She picked it up, took a bite, the warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't just the taste. It was the quiet way he cared, without pity or judgment. Slowly, amid the sarcasm, spilled coffee, and the scratchy old music from the corner speaker, something gentle began to bloom between them. Neither said it aloud, but both felt it. A real connection, quietly forming between two people who once thought they'd forgotten how to feel. On the 5th morning, Ethan casually mentioned he needed to run out for more ingredients. Sophie, sipping coffee on the sofa, squinted at him. "Flour run? You look like you're going to a job interview." He just shrugged, pulling on his old jacket and baseball cap. "Stay here, don't break anything." But once he was out the door, curiosity got the best of her. For the first time, she wondered, who exactly is Ethan Hart? Without thinking much, she threw on his spare hoodie, tugged the hood low, and quietly followed him. He didn't head toward the bakery supply store. Instead, he walked into one of the city's upscale districts, all sleek glass buildings and luxury cars. Sophie's heart pounded as she trailed him. She ducked behind a street lamp, freezing when she saw him enter a building marked Cuisine Collective International Culinary Council. She slipped inside and pretended to be a visitor, just in time to catch a shocking sight. Ethan, still in his simple clothes, being greeted with bows and escorted into a boardroom. An hour later, he emerged alongside a group of sharply dressed executives. One of them said loudly, "Thank you for attending, Chef Hart. We'll have the next quarter's report ready as you requested." Sophie stood in stunned silence. "Chef Hart? You've got to be kidding me. The man who made me wash dishes with a broken faucet is a millionaire chef?" She rushed back to the cafe before he returned, her mind a whirlwind. When Ethan walked in, casual as ever, she stood up, her voice sharp. "Where were you?" He paused mid-step. "Shopping." "Stop lying, I saw everything." Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the cafe kitchen when Sophie spoke. "I saw everything. You're not just some cafe owner." He didn't deny it, didn't offer an excuse. He just slowly removed his cap and lowered his gaze. I'm Ethan Hart. I used to be head chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant. I had a team, reviews in glossy magazines, 16-hour workdays, standing ovations. Then I walked away. Sophie stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief. Why? Why did you hide that from me? He met her gaze with quiet honesty. Because I was tired of people seeing the brand, not the person. I opened this cafe to breathe again, to find a life that wasn't made of pressure and performance. Then you showed up. His voice softened. And for once, I didn't want to be Chef Hart. I wanted someone to stay just for me. Sophie stepped back, her voice trembling. And you didn't trust me to be that someone? Her hands curled into fists. I stayed because you made me feel safe. Because you brewed me coffee without asking. Because you saw me when I couldn't even look at myself. She swallowed the lump in her throat. But I guess I was just another person you didn't trust. Ethan tried to move toward her, but she shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I need time. I don't know who I am right now, let alone who you really are. That night, neither of them slept. Sophie lay on the sofa staring at the ceiling, arms wrapped around a pillow like armor. Ethan sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the fresh loaf of bread he'd baked just for her, one he couldn't bear to serve. By morning, Sophie had packed her bag. Her eyes were red but steady. She stood by the door, where she'd once stumbled in soaking wet and lost, now about to walk out, dry but somehow even more broken. I'm leaving, she said quietly. Ethan, still behind the counter, still making coffee out of habit, didn't look up. I won't stop you, he said. But that doesn't mean I want you to go. She turned away. She didn't look back. Because if she did, she knew she wouldn't be able to leave. Back in her penthouse apartment, surrounded by elegance and silence, Sophie sank into the expensive leather couch. She stared at the skyline, but her thoughts drifted elsewhere, to a tiny kitchen, to a barista with calloused hands, to the warmth of bread and quiet kindness. It all felt empty now. One night, unable to hold it in anymore, she opened her laptop, stared at the blank page, and typed. I used to think love was fireworks and spotlight kisses, but now I know it's coffee brewed in silence, warm bread on a cold night, and a glance that says everything without saying a word. Sophie's blog post went viral. She hadn't used names, but anyone who'd followed the story of the runaway bride knew it was her, a woman abandoned at the altar who found refuge on an old cafe sofa and fell in love with a man who didn't use grand words, just warm bread and quiet presence. Ethan wasn't one to browse the internet, but one of his regulars read the blog out loud while sipping coffee. When they reached the line, I never stopped loving him, Ethan froze mid-pour. His hands trembled. He stared at the customer's phone like it held something too fragile to touch. The rest of the day, he barely spoke. That night, in the quiet of his cafe kitchen, he sent her a single text. Come to the cafe tonight. I have something for you. Sophie stared at the message, her heart raced. When she stepped into the cafe, she gasped. The place looked the same yet different, softer, warmer, candles flickered on the tables. In the center sat a small round table with 2 chairs and a plate of fresh bread. Ethan stood behind the counter, not in his apron, but in a wrinkled white shirt and clean jeans. He didn't say anything at first, just gestured for her to sit. What is this? She joked nervously. A surprise birthday party I didn't know about? Ethan didn't smile. No, just something I should have done a long time ago. He pulled a small handkerchief from his pocket. Wrapped inside was a simple silver ring. I don't have a diamond ring. I don't have a grand gesture, but I have a heart that's already home wherever you are. And I promise, I'll always keep the bread warm and your coffee strong. Sophie blinked, her vision blurring with tears. Will you marry me? He asked, voice soft but steady. She burst out laughing through her tears. You idiot! Who proposes in a bakery? Then she nodded. But yes, I will. Ethan wrapped her in a tight embrace. She lightly thumped his chest. Let go, I can't breathe. He chuckled. I thought you liked the smell of flour. They got married a week later, not in a cathedral or luxury hotel, but right inside the cafe where everything began. Sophie wore a simple white dress she'd picked from a local boutique. Ethan stayed true to himself. A white shirt, worn jeans, and that slightly awkward smile. The guest list was small. There was the old man Sophie had once served soup to at the shelter, a little girl who sold flowers near the cafe, a few neighbors, some loyal customers, no MC, no champagne tower, just candles, soft music, and the smell of warm bread. Their wedding cake? Not a layered masterpiece, but a big golden-crusted loaf baked by Ethan himself. When Sophie accidentally dropped a piece onto her dress, she laughed so hard she snorted. Still as clumsy as ever, Ethan muttered, eyes glowing. And you still love me because of it? She shot back, grinning. That night, after the guests were gone, they curled up on the cafe's old sofa, hands entwined. The warm glow from the shop lights flickered on the walls. They didn't need to speak. I used to think happiness lived in ballrooms, Sophie whispered, head resting on his shoulder. Now I know it's here, just this. Ethan smiled, kissed her forehead. Good, 'cause I've got nothing fancier to give. A year later, they moved into a small wooden house by the sea. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, just a cozy home with a porch facing the waves. Ethan sold most of his shares from the restaurant world but kept the little cafe as a memento. Each morning he woke early to bake and brew. Sophie, now his kitchen assistant, helped, though she still spilled flour and sliced potatoes like a child with safety scissors. They still argued about silly things, but every fight ended in a smile, a hug, or sometimes a new recipe. One afternoon, as Sophie stood behind the counter, she paused, hand resting on her belly. Ethan noticed. What's wrong, hungry again? She shook her head, eyes glistening. No, I think. I'm pregnant. He froze, then laughed, the loudest and happiest she'd ever heard him. Really? I'm gonna be a dad? He scooped her up and spun her around the shop, making the customers clap and cheer. From then on, he started baking low-sugar bread because she craved sour things. He brewed ginger tea, fixed up an old armchair for her comfort, and tucked her in with extra pillows every night. A year later, they welcomed their daughter, Lily, named after the little flower girl from the street. Their small home wasn't grand, but it echoed with laughter, smelled of coffee and bread, and overflowed with love. Each night, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset melt into the sea. Sophie leaned on Ethan's shoulder and whispered, I used to plan perfect weddings for others, thinking happiness came with chandeliers and champagne. Turns out it was always just you, and the smell of fresh bread. He squeezed her hand, smiling. And all I need is you, clumsy, sweet, and perfect like the first loaf you ever dropped. And that's how Sophie, the runaway bride, found her forever, in the arms of a man who simply made her feel seen. No spotlight, no grand promises, just warm bread, quiet care, and a love that showed up, even when unspoken. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. What part of their story did you love most? Let's chat in the comments below. I always read them. Until next time, take care of your heart, and remember, sometimes love finds us when we least expect it and exactly where we need it most.